The Expert at the Card Table, the classic treatise, am I saying that right? On card manipulation. S.W. Erdnase, it's a legendary book, legendary author, and legendary in the sense of like we don't even know who he was, right? It's interesting how a book that has been so studied by so many people. Darwin Ortiz wrote his own version, the annotated Erdnase, a bunch of notes on Erdnase. This is a great book. This is really cool. Vernon's, was obsessed with the book. I remember hearing an interview or something, or a quote from somewhere that Vernon, cards were his passion. The Expert at the Card Table was his obsession. Vernon's Revelation is a great resource to study Erdnase. The Man Who Was Erdnase, Jeff Busby, Martin Gardner, Whaley. This was an interesting read. I don't think it's entirely valid. They have a photo of who they claim was Erdnase. There he is, Milton Franklin Andrews. I don't believe that's correct. And David Benn's slightly more recent than these other three books. His reimagining of The Expert at the Card Table, it's kind of a reblocking of the text. The point being, Erdnase has been studied by so many brilliant magicians over the years, and I think despite some of the material being a little bit dated and a little bit old school, I think it still has so much value to study in today's day and age. One of the most fascinating things to a lot of historians in magic is, who was Erdnase? Who was he? Being a card cheat, he couldn't obviously use his real name, but people figured out quite early that S.W. Erdnase backwards is E.S. Andrews, which is a major hint to possible identity. But I don't know, this book was an interesting read. It was an interesting story about Milton Franklin Andrews. I don't think it's correct. For example, for starters, Milton Franklin Andrews, why is it M.F. Andrews? It should be E.S. Andrews, judging by this. And also, the whole section of The Expert on the Card Table of the Deportment of the Professional, I don't have it marked in here, but he talks about how, you should have your wits about you. You should be calm, level-headed, shouldn't squeal when you get the worst of it. You should, he even refers to the philosophy of the Stoic. That struck a chord with me. I'm big into Stoicism. But the point is, the Man Who Was Erdnase, Milton Franklin Andrews, was pretty wild and ended up in a murder-suicide crazy situation. So I don't think this was the guy who was Erdnase, but David Benn, not in this book, but in his other book that he has, which I don't actually have a copy of, but he proposes an interesting candidate for who Erdnase was. I highly recommend you look up David Benn's book on The Man Who Was Erdnase. I can't remember what it's called, but it's got some really interesting ideas and very convincing. The initials match up. The situation matches up, his job lines up. One thing that David Benn pointed out in his book was that for someone to have mastered this much material and be able to do it under fire in gambling situations, they have to have a certain type of job where it allows them to practice all the time. And also, Erdnase would have to have a steady load of new people to play cards with all the time. And David Benn found a candidate that fits all that. One of the things I love about this book is the section, No Pretensions of Piety. And that's kind of a shot at, I guess during Erdnase's time and slightly before, there's a lot of expose of gambling of gambling techniques by reformed gamblers. Jonathan Green was one of them. He was recently featured in Genie magazine. I don't know if you caught that article, but interesting article. And it's interesting to read about Jonathan Green, who was supposedly had this revelation that gambling is bad, and reformed, and went out on a crusade against bad people who were cheating at cards, cheating at gambling houses that were taking more than the edge they should take. He actually made a claim. This was something interesting in Jonathan Green's lecture back in the late 1800s, that he made a claim that any deck of cards that comes from the card printers is always marked. for like cheating and nefarious means. And he would do a demonstration. He would have a deck brought to him, and he would identify cards by looking at the back of them. But the thing is, he actually had a little mirror hidden in his hand, and he'd peek the index of the card, peek the card. Maybe not, they weren't indexes at that point, I'm not sure. But he'd peek the card through the mirror, and but the thing is, this wasn't a trick. This wasn't an entertainment situation. This was where he was actually like presenting a lecture. So like, you know, this guy goes through this reformed gambling thing. You know, he's supposedly this righteous guy, and then he's cheating people in the lecture. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. So I like that about Erdnase. You know, no qualms about it. Just needed the money, so that's why he published the book. So one of the things that I think is so valuable about Erdnase is reading between the lines and finding the philosophy and the core of what his belief about card handling and cheating and magic is all about. You know, his lessons like uniformity of action, his lessons like naturalness, those kind of things. Vernon was huge into that, and he was a huge influence on magic in the 20th century based off his studying of Erdnase. And a lot of magicians, you know, debate whether or not Erdnase's bottom deal is the best bottom deal out there, and like that's the wrong thing to like focus on. Like focus on the actual like core beliefs of Erdnase. The philosophy is where the true value of this book lies. That's my opinion. There's so much in here before you even get to the technical advice. Just you know, the deportment of the professional is one of my favorite things. Like being kind of like not being so like rattled when you lose or something, or when something goes wrong in a performance. You got to maintain your cool, and that's a key thing that Erdnase talked about. One of the things I like about Erdnase is his. I think you can learn a lot about his disdain for, you know, like mark decks, hold-up machines, stuff like that. You can tell he doesn't like that style, and he'd much prefer pure skill stuff. I don't think it's an ego thing either. I think it's based off the idea that if you get busted with like a card holdout up your sleeve, I mean, it's pretty hard to explain that away as a misunderstanding. And I don't know what he talks about that in this book. You know, if someone maybe saw you bottom deal, it can maybe be chalked up to like just them seeing something they didn't actually see. It's suspected, right? And also, I like what Erdnase says about not working with a partner, about liking to fly solo. You know, that's why he was obsessed with the perfect cut, the perfect shift, sorry, to undo the cut. And I think a lot of things that he talks about, I think they're applicable to magic and mentalism, in the sense of like, you know, not always relying on gimmicks, not relying too heavily on things that if they go wrong, they expose not just the secret, but like the fact that you're using tricky setup objects. I mean, that's a huge blow to your reputation. One thing I find funny about this book is that Erdnase hated the cold deck so much, right? He says something about it. I'm not sure where it is. I don't have, I think I have it, I don't know, somewhere around here. He talks about the cold deck. Oh yeah. Of course, an exchange may be made by sleight of hand, but the player who can accomplish this feat successfully is generally well versed in the higher orders of card table artifice and will dispense with such makeshifts as cold decks or any kind of prepared cards. It's interesting. It strikes me as like, I'm not sure why he hated it so much. He doesn't expand on that, and it strikes me as a pretty awesome method for cheating. Like setting up a couple of hands and ringing in a cold deck on your cut or something strikes me as a pretty badass way to cheat. And I don't know, I've never cheated, so I can't, I'm only speaking from hypothesis here, but I don't know, it's funny that Erdnase hated that. One last little note, I like the line in Erdnase, "We betray no confidences." It's interesting that it seems like there's almost like an honor among card cheats, right? That's like, it's for such an unscrupulous career path. It's funny that he's saying, you know, I'm not stepping on anyone's toes here. I'm just exposing stuff that's well known. This book, I'm just beginning to study it in depth. I've read it through it numerous times. I'm going to continue to study it. I'm going to continue to study all the techniques in it. Obviously, I don't think I'll master them all. That would take a long time. But I'm gonna play with all the techniques. So if you're curious about hearing my thoughts on Erdnase, make sure you subscribe. Keep watching the videos, and yeah, I'm gonna keep checking out Erdnase, the classic. I don't know how to say that word. Treatise. I should know how. On card manipulation. And I'm going to refer to some of these books as well. These are really cool. I love the books that have been written about Erdnase. I've studied them a fair bit, but yeah, I've decided I'm gonna dive deep into Erdnase. Exploring Erdnase is going to be a major focus of this year, maybe the next couple of years. We'll see how it goes, and I hope you tag along to see what I uncover. McKinley, peace and out. Till next time, much love. Take care.